not going to leave the country, and I am not going to reform. Neither am I going to be taken alive again. William H. Bonney, 1881.
Welcome to a very special episode of Chasing Billy. Today we have on a very awesome and legendary guest, the award-winning author and musician, hell of a banjo player, Mark Lee Gardner. Mark is an author of a library of really good books on Billy the Kid, Jesse James, Teddy Roosevelt, Crazy Horse, and now set to be released on November 11th, Brothers of the Gun, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and A Reckoning in Tombstone.
That's $500, Holliday. You win a rep. $500 must be a peach of a hand.
Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have you on here, man.
I'm happy to be here. I like what you're doing. And I hope you continue doing what you're doing.
Well, me too. As long as the masses keep flocking to Chasing Billy, we're going to keep doing it.
Good.
We'll talk about masses flocking to history here in a little bit, but let's talk a bit about your new book. Tell us, Brothers of the Gun, obviously about Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, another dual biography, which has become a really good way of presenting a story. Your To Hell on a Fast Horse was a very effective way of telling the Billy the Kid story. And so tell us about this book and how it came about, why you felt the need to write Brothers of the Gun, and what direction it goes in.
Sure. There's certain duos in the West, and I think maybe I've covered them all by now, but there's certain stories where you can't tell one without the other. I mean, you can't write a Billy the Kid book without telling a lot about Pat Garrett, right? And it's the same thing with Pat Garrett. If you're writing about Pat Garrett, well, that's his claim to fame. And it's the same really with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. It's any Wyatt Earp book ends up having a lot of Doc Holliday. Any Doc Holliday book has a lot of Wyatt Earp, and they should. I mean, there's a reason for that. Their stories are linked together, and they did things together, which makes their stories fascinating and unforgettable. And I think, the fact of the matter is with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, I call it the most famous friendship of the Old West. And a lot of people from the movies, they know that they're friends, but they don't know how they became friends or the length of that friendship or the depth of the friendship. And so, you asked, why this book or why I picked this book. Well, I was fascinated by this bond that these two men had. No one had told their stories together before. And I kind of wanted to examine that bond a little deeper and trace both their lives and how they finally come together and how they become friends in Dodge City and really how Wyatt sticks with Doc in the worst of times. Wyatt wrote later that Doc was his own worst enemy, and they used Doc against Wyatt in Tombstone to try to make Wyatt look bad. But he never gave up on his friend, and certainly if Wyatt ever needed help, Doc Holliday was right there, and in classic moments, and from the Vendetta ride especially. So anyway, I just find their stories fascinating, and that angular hook where nobody has really told them together. And also, when I take on a project, I have to feel confident that I can find, new information. It may not be a lot, but my goal is to enrich the story, and the other goal is to tell it better than it's ever been told before. And that may sound highfalutin or whatever, but I really want to write it and tell it better and tell it more accurately and incorporate the latest research. And with this subject, fortunately, there's a lot of scholars out there. And James, it's just like the Billy the Kid story. In recent years, there's been so much that's come to light because of people digging into the resources that are out there. And it's the same thing with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. People have continued to dig deeper. And that helps me because I can incorporate those latest findings as well as the things that I found while I was researching the book. So I consider this the most up-to-date account of these two iconic individuals.
I think that's awesome. Something you said there about, you can say it's highfalutin or what have you, but it really should be everyone's goal when they set out to write a book like this, to tell the story in the best way that it's been told up to this point, because a big part of that is telling the story again for a new generation of readers. And that's an important thing, because it's not about telling it more technically, telling it technically better than people already have, or arrangement. It's about writing within a time period and releasing the same material new and making it fresh for new readers. And I think that's a very important thing, and not really highfalutin at all if you look at it in that way. But another thing, and I kind of encountered this in the Wyatt Earp field, and a little more than the Billy field, I could be wrong, but when I look into Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, I tend to find a ton of books on them, yet very few books that you can trust. More so than in Billy the Kid. I mean, you look at Billy the Kid and you may have issues with certain histories, but you've got Utley, you've got Nolan, you've got Mills now, you've got all these folks coming to the fore. There's tons of Billy books. But it seems like when I go looking for a good Wyatt book, that I don't know what to trust. It seems like there's fewer legitimate, trustworthy sources, yet more overall books that deal with the legendary and a little less scholarly or less trustworthy sources. And so this is a welcome addition from you, because we know that this is now one more book that you can trust in the Wyatt Earp Doc Holliday field. Because I was reading a book on Doc Holliday recently, and I got to the point where he went to medical school, and he went to school in Pennsylvania. Is that right?
In Philadelphia, was dental school. It was a dental school.
Dental school. Yeah. And so the one I was reading said he went to school in Baltimore and caught the seedy, tuberculosis in the seedy part of town in Baltimore and stuff. I got to research and Doc, and I was like, that's very incorrect, And it's like, it's really hard when you're going into a field you don't know a lot about, because I'm all about Billy, and I'm just, dipping my toe into other areas right now. And it's like, I don't know what to believe and what not to believe. So it's good that there are writers like yourself who have, demonstrated their research and their trustworthiness, that you can have faith. I'm going to pick up this book and know that I'm going to get the most up-to-date research and the most up-to-date tale as it happened, and not some legend or just completely incorrect stuff going on.
How can you trust a man that wears both a belt and suspenders? Man can't even trust his own pants.
And that's why I've had other fellow authors that they made a decision. I decided not to do a bibliography or whatever, and nobody reads those. And well, you know what? Other historians read those. Your book reviewers read those, and my point is, in including them, I want people to know that I went to the Huntington Library. I want them to know every resource that I consulted. And it's, you can see that in Telling a Fast Horse on up. I mean, I have extensive bibliographies and also extensive notes, because especially with the Wyatt Earp story and the Doc Holliday story to some extent, there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of confusion. And so if I'm coming down one way or the other, they can go to the endnote and see, oh, here's your sources. This is how I came up with this, or whatever. So that's really important to me. But at the same time, the writing is just as important. I want it to be a great narrative. I want it to be entertaining and interesting, but based on fact and anchored in the primary sources. So I mean, other people will disagree with me, I'm sure, on certain things, but they can see my notes, and they can decide for themselves. Oh, okay, so he says Wyatt helped hold off the mob there in Tombstone. This is where he got that information, and I have other information that disagrees with that, but this is they'll know where I'm coming from with my sources in the book. And I think it's silly today for authors not to include a bibliography. I mean, you should show your reader that you did the work.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I don't know. Switching off here, how much time, you're talking about research, how much time do you spend in research before writing a book? And I know this is something I've experienced myself. How do you know when it's time to just put a cap on it and say, okay, I've researched it enough? Because a big problem I've experienced is you could go on researching indefinitely. I mean, you get stuck in that rabbit hole, and you're like, what if I find one more piece in the next few weeks that'll just totally change course, So how do you know when you've reached that point?
You've never reached that. It's a deadline that forces you to reach that. But I'll tell you, James, I was making changes up to the minute where my editor was sternly telling me that this is the very last change. Because the thing is that, it had been written and turned in for several months before they got into the typesetting, the proofing, and all that stuff. And then I'm looking at that, there's either a better way of saying this. You're always improving your writing or looking at better ways, but also little things. Here's a perfect example. So, and I know you wanted to talk about. So there's this now famous story about Wyatt Earp and the mules that you read about, and that's in my book, and I sourced. It came from this Denver newspaper, and I actually checked to see that Wyatt was actually in Denver at that time. But when I sent an advanced copy of the book to Roy Young, Roy said, "Mark, I got to tell you, we've got some problems with this." So I had just enough time. I didn't take it out because I can't change the pagination. I had just enough time to suggest that this might be a Wyatt Whopper. So it's still in the book, but now the reader knows that, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But anyway, so that your listeners probably are familiar, Wyatt told this story where he claims where he was escaping through Oklahoma. He was being chased by a posse. He goes into Veneta. There's a corral with mules. He steals a mule and takes off. And then he hears the posse behind him. And when the posse finally catches up and he thinks it's the end, it turns out it's the rest of the mules that were following the Bell mare. Well, what Roy Young found was that story had been published maybe a few months, maybe 6 months earlier, and it was attributed to Frank James. And now I'm not even sure personally that Frank James told that story, because there's some problems with where Frank James says he was and that Jesse was with him. Sure. Jesse wasn't with Frank in Kentucky and Quantrell. I think that might be some writer's imagination. And I don't think Wyatt Earp told the story either, James, because Wyatt Earp would have had to have had a photographic memory, because if you remember from the article, he's making exact quotes. Yeah, word for word. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if that reporter even saw Wyatt Earp. I highly doubt that came from Wyatt Earp, because it's so close, exact words from this other piece. And I think the journalist in Denver, he got a hold of that newspaper. Oh, nobody from Kentucky or Tennessee is going to know this out here. And he just put Wyatt Earp in there, and it made it a timely local connection, because Wyatt Earp was in town, and he could say, "Oh yeah, I got this. This is what Wyatt Earp told me," or whatever. So anyway, it's a great story, and I've had people that read my book, the advanced copies. I love that story. Well, it turns out I told it even better than Wyatt, I guess, in my book, because it was very memorable. It's very memorable for them, but now we know that it's highly questionable. And I really don't think it came from Wyatt. I think it was that journalist that plagiarized another piece, which is too bad, And I'm currently writing a book about Frank and Jesse in the Civil War. I can't even use it in that.
Oh. Mister, I've been in a real bad mood for a couple of years, so why don't you leave me alone? Some people say it didn't happen that way.
Never mind them, Wyatt. It happened that way.
So anyway.
Yeah. That's one of the problems with newspapers is it's one of our primary sources that we have to rely on, but half the time those guys are just lying and fabricating whole cloth.
Oh, sure, creating
I
dialogue,
remember,
and that's the other funny thing. If you read that story, it's not the reporter firsthand. He's getting it secondhand from somebody else, and the guy remembers exactly what Frank said, word for word. And then this reporter who's supposedly jotting this down is getting it exactly. And I don't know. I find it highly suspicious. But you're right. It's anybody now can go to these newspaper websites. Some of them are free, like Chronicling America. Some of them you can get to your library. Anybody now can go through that, and they'll find a reference to Doc Holliday. And I tell you, there's a gazillion false Doc Holliday stories. There's false Wyatt Earp story, and the Billy the Kid. It's crazy how many made up Billy the Kid stories are out. That made good entertainment, and nobody was fact checking. There was no such thing as a fact checker in the 19th century at these newspapers. So.
No, there wasn't, and that's the problem. And that's really, when even myself, when folks are like, "Hey, you found this or that," or you found out James Bell was so and so, or if I find something new or something like that, I've just gone online at my house and looked at stuff. I don't call myself, a historian or anything like that, because it's so accessible these days, and anybody can look. But the pitfall, the temptation is to trust everything you see out there.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And there is so much. I mean, those old newspapers were terrible, and that's what you run into. I remember. I don't delve too much into Wyatt Earp, but I do know, like, there was this incident with Luke Short when they went to, he was like calling on all the guns to come back to Dodge City because he was in trouble.
Yeah.
I know. It was shortly before then, Wyatt Earp was in Colorado, maybe.
Yes,
and he was saying, there was this rumor that Shotgun Collins was on his way to, and Wyatt were on their way together to Dodge City or something. And Wyatt published apparently a letter in a newspaper and was like, "Shotgun Collins is not even in town. I am not going to Dodge City. This is all made up." And then all of a sudden, there's a picture of all of them in Dodge City.
I quote that letter in my book. Yeah, he's denying it, and then all of a sudden, here he is. He's in Dodge City, and there's a photograph of the peacekeepers or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's and I do think that Wyatt wrote that letter denying. But because maybe he just doesn't want people to know what he's doing or his movements or what have you, and I do think he wrote that, but for some reason he abruptly changed his mind and went out to Dodge City. But yeah, so it would have been a surprise to the people reading those papers, just as it was to you. 100 years later, it's the people at that time. Well, he said he wasn't going. So
yeah. Well, I came across that because Shotgun Collins was at one point identified as the man who let John Poe know that Billy was hiding out in Fort Sumner. And I don't think it's true, but I was doing some work into Shotgun Collins and I came across that and I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Did Wyatt not know he was going?
Yeah.
But that's what you deal with. And I don't want to, before we leave the Wyatt realm and get into other topics or deeper topics, I got to ask, from an entertainment perspective, do you enjoy Tombstone or Wyatt Earp more, the Kevin Costner film or the Kurt Russell film, or do you not like either, knowing the history?
They both have their good qualities. I mean, I think they're both entertaining cinematically.
Yes.
I really like Kevin Costner in just about anything that he's in.
Me too.
But also, the movie Tombstone, you've just got those character actors that play, and I'm not talking about Kurt Russell, but I mean, you've got Sam Elliott,
yes,
and Michael Biehn, who plays. I mean, that Johnny Ringo of his is scary.
Hey, Johnny, what that Mexican mean a sick horse is gonna get us, huh?
It's quoting the Bible. Revelations. Behold, a pale horse. The man who sat on him was death. And hell followed with him.
his eyes,
Yeah.
and then the interplay between him and Val Kilmer. I mean, it's kind of riveting viewing, actually. Now, I have problems with that movie. Like the last 15 minutes, I think, are awful, where they're just posses riding back and forth. It just looks like it was kind of slapped together at the end.
Right.
But anyway, but I think they both have their good points. I tend to favor, Tombstone for just entertainment alone, and also the
Yes.
dialogue in Tombstone. Now, Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner, that also incorporates historic dialogue as well, and it's more accurate when it comes to the gunfight because the smaller space that the gun, in Tombstone they have this wide open area where they're having this fight. It's more accurate in the movie Wyatt Earp. But I mean, there's just so many memorable scenes with Tombstone, like Johnny Ringo and Val Kilmer in the gambling hall, and they're spinning guns and cups.
Oh yeah.
And they're quoting Latin to one another. And I saw an interview with Kurt Russell, and I had to agree with what he was saying. But he said, as far as Westerns go, he says there's no Western that has as many quotable lines as Tombstone. And there's not. I mean, people can recall all kinds of lines from Tombstone.
If I thought you weren't my friend, I just don't think I could bear it. Good evening, then.
But not really many from other Westerns, I mean, like maybe Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid. Who are those guys, But other than lines like that, or hell, the fall will kill you. But, other than a couple of lines from Butch Cassidy and the Searchers, John Wayne had That'll Be the Day line. Tombstone has a lot of lines that people remember. And it's neat that the screenwriter, Kevin Jarre, he did his research. He pulled those from the historical record.
Yeah, I do know. I think it was Lawrence Kasdan is his name who directed the Kevin Costner one. I always like to say it's cool to get the Wyatt Earp story from the guy that gave me Empire Strikes Back. That's one of
yeah.
But the cinematography is great.
It is, and I like the soundtrack for Wyatt Earp with the Kevin Costner. It's a more orchestral soundtrack than Tombstone. But Tombstone is Wyatt Earp is the entire life of. I mean, it goes into details for his entire career. And if I remember correctly, and you're catching me a little early because this weekend I'm going to be watching both of them in preparation for. I have an interview with Michael Bean on Monday for his podcast.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to watch both those again. And Michael Bean is a Wyatt Earp hater, by the way, which is kind of appropriate, right? Because he played Johnny Ringo, but he doesn't have a very high opinion of Wyatt Earp at all. But anyway, I'm going to be watching those again. But if I remember correctly, the Wyatt Earp film does show the first meeting between Wyatt and Doc. And I can't think of any other film that treats that meeting. It's only that one.
Now this displays my ignorance, but is that how they met when he was on the trail for Dave Rudabaugh?
Yes, it is. Yeah. They met at Fort Griffin, Texas, and the saloon bar owner Shancy, if that's how you pronounce his name. Wyatt goes up to him and says, "Do you know where I can find these guys?" He said, "Well, if anybody will know, it's Doc Holliday. Do you know him?" And no, he doesn't know him. And that's where they first meet. But Wyatt said he wasn't really looking to become Doc's friend at that time. He said, my only interest in Doc was getting information. And so Doc said, give me a couple of days or a day or two, and I'll see what I can find out. And in the meantime, Doc is asking Wyatt about Dodge City. And again, Doc is thinking about where I can go next, where I can make some money or whatever. And so he's getting information on Dodge City. And then that's it. That's where Doc ends up, is after meeting Wyatt, and Wyatt goes his own way looking for these guys. And then Doc and Kate show up in Dodge City. And that's the very last time, unless another newspaper is scanned that we don't know about. That's the last time that Doc put out an ad to be a dentist, was when he's in Dodge City. There's no ads in Prescott, Arizona. There's no ads in Tombstone. He was a professional gambler after, even in Dodge City. But no, I don't think he had any intentions of starting up a dental office after Dodge City. because you don't see any references. The only reference you have to him as a dentist is in the 1880 census for Arizona, and he lists his occupation as dentist. And I'm sure, as I write in my book, that the census taker was probably chuckling when he wrote that down, because he wasn't doing any dentistry at all in Prescott. And then, of course, I mean, and you know this, James, because I'm sure you use the census records. There are so many problems with the census. I mean, I'm so glad we have it. But for instance, in Tombstone, Wyatt Earp and his brother Virgil, their occupation is listed as farmer. So, I mean, they were not farming in Tombstone, but that's the occupation. I'm like, did Wyatt really tell this guy I'm a farmer? And Wyatt hated farming by all accounts. He tried to run away from home and get away from the cornfield when he was a kid. So I'm glad we have the census records and we can use them, but you got to be careful. Billy said he works in cattle. He works in cattle. Oh yeah, he works in cattle.
As long as Billy the Kid is taking some back, I'm with him.
Everything all right, Mr. Chisholm?
Yes, everything's fine. Go on and bring the men in, and we'll have a little fresh coffee with the boys here.
Yoo-hoo! I'll make you famous.
Sure does. Other people's cattle.
Sure does.
Yeah.
But that leads me to another question, actually, because Wyatt meets Doc looking for Dave Rudabaugh. Mm-hmm. Ends up in Dodge City. Rudabaugh ends up in New Mexico running with Billy the Kid. And this is actually something me and Pierre were talking about, is that you have this small world. It's a small world today, much less I can imagine back then, but they live in close proximity. And they no doubt would hear about each other, but how feasible is it that all these people would have crossed paths and known about each other? Or was it the opposite? Were they isolated parts? Were the cities so isolated from each other you didn't really know what was going on? I mean, is it likely that Jesse James met Billy the Kid? Could Wyatt Earp have been in Wichita at the same time as Billy the Kid? Stuff like that, you think that's feasible?
Well, it depends on what crowd they're hanging out with and what parts of town. If they're hanging out, Wyatt would pretty much know everybody in the gambling dens in Wichita and the brothels in Wichita. And right. he would probably recall a certain person that he had met, that if he encounters him later. I've never believed the Jesse James Billy the Kid story. I do believe that Jesse James was in Las Vegas, but Jesse James was. I mean, he was such a different criminal than Billy the Kid. I mean, I just don't see. I mean, the story is he tried to recruit Billy. I don't believe that. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I mean, you never know, but I find that hard to believe. But I do believe Jesse James was in Las Vegas. We even had a Secret Service agent that writes about. He was he got an inquiry from headquarters and said, "Well, hey, if I'd known you were wanting Jesse James, I heard he was here or whatever." So there's more than just a couple of references to Jesse James being there. And I always tell folks, I said, the people in Northfield, they didn't think Jesse James was there either until later. And they found out it was the James Younger gang. They were all denying, I couldn't have been. They're from Missouri. There's no way. Well, it turns out it was them. So Jesse James was really good about going places that nobody expected him to be.
Oh, yeah. It makes writing a book about him extremely difficult, I'm sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, of course, sometimes it's pretty easy to find those counts that are just speculation or bogus or what have you. But it's funny. I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten from people about Jesse James and a family story. And these two strangers showed up at my ancestor's cabin, and they were given a meal. Yeah. And when they left, there was a $5 gold piece under the plate or what. I've heard that story so many times, or that Jesse watered his horse at our well, those kinds of things. And, they're speculating later. It's like, gee, those strangers were suspicious. I wonder if that was Jesse and Frank. But I just got an email just this week, and a lady said that her, I don't know, great grandfather or something lived in Stillwater and was a friend of Cole Younger. Had befriended Cole Younger in prison. And she says, I even have a letter of Cole Younger. Would you like to see it? And I haven't written her back yet, but I want to see, it's, Stillwater is where they were. And they let all kinds of people come in to visit those guys. I mean, it was not a high security. I mean, it was the state prison, but it wasn't like a prison today. They could
Mm.
have visitors and girlfriends. They had women that were just falling in love with them right and left there. So anyway, yeah. So to get back to your point, these guys, if they're running in the same circles, and Wyatt's circle is going to be gambling halls and brothels in both Wichita and Dodge City, and certainly gambling halls in Tombstone. So if you're a frequenter of those places and you get your air often enough, Wyatt is going to know you or recognize you. Now, I should say that I'm not trying to belittle or to put a negative light on Wyatt. I mean, as a lawman, he's supposed to be at those places. I mean, that's where usually the trouble breaks out. There's a guy with a gun, it has to be disarmed, a drunken cowboy or whatever. So Wyatt, because of his job, was policing those places quite a bit. But he also liked to gamble, and he would be there gambling as well. But anyway, so that's kind of his sphere, and it's the same with Doc Holliday. I mean, Doc Holliday is a professional gambler, so he's going to be hanging out in those places where there's other gamblers, there's money to be made, and that's why Shancy says in Fort Griffin, well, if anybody would know, it'd be Doc Holliday, because he knows everybody that comes in and out of here.
Why do you think that in retrospect, when it came time for Wyatt Earp to tell his story, or for Sadie, or anybody across any territory of Western history, why did they make so much up when so much of their history is already interesting? Why did they fabricate or conceal or lie half the time? So
that's a really good question. We could talk about that for hours, but there's several reasons. Especially with Sadie and Wyatt. I mean, there were, I'm sure James, and I won't assume, but I'll say with me, there are parts of my youth that I would rather not reveal to a biographer, that are somewhat embarrassing, and things that I wish I could have done in a different way. And I think it's the same thing with Wyatt. It's like, yeah, he was a pimp in Peoria, Illinois. He, was arrested, as a horse thief, and later he's a lawman. And it's like, I'd rather not, that's in my past, and that's not who I am now. And I'm a little sympathetic to Wyatt because, he's a constable in Lamar, Missouri. He's like 21 years old. I mean, that's so young. Yeah. And you have to remember too, I mean, one of the things I'm getting on a tangent here. One of the things that I think is so remarkable about Wyatt, and people don't realize, but there was no police academy in 1871. All right, there was no place to train.
Right.
You learned this on the job, and sometimes you got killed, because you made a mistake. And Wyatt, survived and was in some really tough places. He physically, I mean, there were so many, James. All these boomtowns had anti-gun laws. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it's like you can't carry a gun. And people, I mean, today I think they would be shocked. Oh, well, the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms. Well, not in these boomtowns, because people didn't like guns going off everywhere. And so they had these ordinances. And unlike today, when an individual's disarmed, today, I mean, you can watch on YouTube, if some policeman sees a gun, they shout gun, and then it's fireworks. I mean, they're not giving these guys a chance to get rid of their gun. They're shooting first and asking questions later. Well, Wyatt's job in Wichita and Dodge City, he had to go up and disarm these guys. And so each time you go up to disarm somebody, you're taking a chance of getting killed. And it happened. Bat Masterson's brother in Dodge City, he was killed disarming a drunken cowboy. And then Marshall White in Tombstone killed while disarming a cowboy. Anyway, but let's get back to your thing about why they would lie. So, there are parts of Wyatt Earp's past that he didn't want, in a biography. And again, this is also, I mean, it is so different today. I mean, we have tell-alls today, and people will tell their own dirty secrets because it sells books, right? They'll admit to things today without any shame. But in the 1920s, it just, you didn't do that. You didn't want to cast yourself in an unsavory light. And so Wyatt Earp actually wrote his cousin, when Stuart Lake was researching his biography, the Earp biography, and he told his cousin George Earp, "Now you're going to get a letter from Stuart Lake. Don't tell him anything about Lamar. Please don't tell him. Keep quiet." Because Lamar had run off with the county tax money that he had collected. So anyway, so he had parts of his past, and so Sadie was the same way. She, and we know this from Peter Brand's research, she had been a teenage prostitute, and apparently a very successful one. Johnny Bean fell in love with her, and that was the kind of thing that, I mean, that would be so awful and shameful in the 1920s and 30s. Oh yes, I was a prostitute. I mean, it just. Yeah. It's not something that you wanted out there. And so they both tried very hard to cover their tracks. And I mean, they could no way have imagined, with our access to historic court records and newspapers today, that these things would come to light. I mean, they would be spinning in their graves. And they died thinking they had taken their secrets to their graves. And they had a lot of secrets. But also with Wyatt, I do think that sometimes that he was confused. I always go back to what Eugene Manlove Rhodes said about Wyatt. He's a kind of a contemporary of Wyatt Earp. He ties into the Billy the Kid, Pat Garrett story, as you know.
Yeah.
Very famous. I mean, he's famous now. Well, not so famous now, unfortunately, as a novelist and short story writer. But he'd started out as a real cowboy and was brilliant. And he knew these guys. And he helped get, the story of Oliver Lee and how he Rhodes helped get him to the different county to turn himself in. But anyway, Eugene Manlove Rhodes said, lying was the coward's way. And he says, Wyatt Earp was no coward, but he might have been mixed. Wyatt Earp was old and he's seeing these stories repeated over and over again, many of them false. And he's telling his story. And, as an 80-year-old man, I could easily see him getting confused about things. But then there are also things which are so hard to rectify with that line of thought. For instance, he claimed that he killed Johnny Ringo. He drew a map.
Right.
By all accounts, he wasn't there. Now, I mean, I wasn't following Wyatt around to know exactly where he was, but it seems like he was still in Colorado at that time. So, as I say in my book, the bigger mystery to me isn't who killed Johnny Ringo. The bigger mystery is, why would Wyatt Earp claim that he killed Johnny Ringo?
Right.
How does that happen if he didn't do it? I mean, why would he claim that? But there's other things, and this comes with one of my important resources for this book was, have you heard of the John Flood manuscript at all with Wyatt?
No.
Okay. So John Flood was a friend of Wyatt's, and he lived nearby in Los Angeles. And anyway, Wyatt enlisted John Flood to write his story. So John Flood took notes, and then he typed those notes up into this narrative. Well, then he took the narrative. All right. So the narrative is basically the oral dictation from Wyatt. Well, he took the dictation, and then he created this manuscript that they tried to take to a publisher. And the manuscript, the John Flood manuscript, is pretty bad. It's just not well written. But what I used, and I did see that, I have a copy of the manuscript. What I used was that dictation. And it's a photostat copy that's at the Tombstone courthouse. It's in the Josephine Earp papers. And that's the closest we have to Wyatt Earp's actual story. And there's several things in there that he claimed that I was able to validate and find, yes, this is how it happened, the way he said, and it matched up to the historical record. So that was my most important source. Now, there are still controversies, and I don't know how you deal with it. I mentioned it in the endnotes, but he claimed that in Ellsworth, Kansas, that he arrested Ben Thompson, I believe. You can find all kinds of reports that Wyatt Earp either wasn't there or wasn't involved in that arrest, that it was somebody else that made the arrest. But it's like Wyatt Earp stuck to that story forever. And even later, his wife stuck to that story. And I have her letter. She said, oh, yeah, he said this is the way it happened or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, it's like who do you believe? If things are questionable, I always point that out in my endnotes. And if it's also questionable, I don't spend a lot of time on that story because I don't want to, spend paragraphs and paragraphs explaining how this happened when there's a lot of doubt about it. So I do reference it, but it's not a big part of my book. And I explain in the notes that it is controversial. But I mean, it's a conundrum. I mean, the fact that like a snapping turtle, he just holds on to this and he repeats it more. This is what I did, and then other things he says, are quite accurate. And it's like, well, gee, how can he tell the truth here? And then why is he fibbing here? And here's the other thing, James, he was always so irate at individuals that told falsehoods about him. He just was on a tear.
Right.
The story came out that was false, and it really upset him. So it's like, if you're so mad because people got the record wrong, well, why are you screwing up the record yourself? I mean, that just seemed to be a huge thing with him. James, he was so mad at this one reporter. This one reporter wrote a story about him and said that he was already dead.
This is the West, sir. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend.
He's talked about he died in California or something. And it took him 2 years, but he tracked this guy down and he confronted him. And of course, this guy's petrified. Wyatt Earp's on his front porch. And the guy said, the guy backed down. And basically, as I say in my book, he said anything to get Wyatt Earp off his porch, because he was terrified. Yeah. But this is a cool connection. That reporter that wrote that bad story about Wyatt was John M. Scanlon, who wrote one of the first biographies of Pat
Garrett. Yeah.
Yeah. That was what upset Wyatt. Yeah. So here, John Scanlon, wrote about Pat Garrett, and then he's still writing newspaper stuff, and he makes this thing up about it's full all kinds of lies. He claims that the Earp brothers were stage robbers and all this stuff. But yeah, John Scanlon, there's a connection between Wyatt and Pat Garrett through John Scanlon.
Well, if I recall, I don't know that Scanlon did a great job with Pat.
Not really.
I have his little booklet on my shelf behind me, but I always wondered if Scanlon still had the copy of Pat's tintype when he died.
Yes. That's a huge mystery. Of course, he reproduces it on the back cover, and it's
terrible.
It's terrible. It's prop.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, gosh, where did that go? Did he give it back to Pat's daughter? Did he keep it? And then you also wonder, I mean, that had to go to a newspaper or a print shop. Well, did they take it and then did they just lose it because it was his old cruddy tintype and they didn't place any value in it? And because we could talk forever about those tintypes. Pat Garrett supposedly loaned a copy or a tintype to Lew Wallace, who was writing his autobiography, because Pat Garrett actually mentions that to a reporter. Oh yeah, I sent off this tintype. Well, where's it? It's not on the Lew Wallace papers. What happened to it?
Yeah. And I often wonder, looking at Scanlon's reproduction, if maybe Pat's copy by that time had torn, because it looks like it's drawn in at some points. Like, Billy's gun looks terrible.
Oh yeah, it's really been altered or whatever, but. I'm still glad to see it on there, because we know that at one point that tintype, where it last was, and but no, it's heavily altered, and sadly there was no Photoshop then to help it at all. So
it never came out very well. Your book, To Hell on a Fast Horse, has actually always been one of my favorites.
Good.
In terms of readability, accuracy, research that goes into it. I want to talk about your take on the dynamic between Billy and Pat, and it's a particularly sore spot for me in the Billy community, because you can hardly ever bring up Pat on social media or somewhere without the obligatory "Pat was a coward, shot Billy in the back" comments that just flood the comment section. And I know Pat had serious flaws. I know he had some issues.
And to whom do I owe the pleasure? Pat Garrett. Bona fide celebrity.
But I have a soft spot for Pat, and I think Pat is more of a tragic hero a lot of times, and really, really got the Judas treatment. You know, when they mythologize the kid into a folk hero, they likewise mythologize Pat into a Judas, and I think that's really been bad for Pat's memory. But I wanted your take on it, how you saw Pat and Billy, and do you think Pat, you know, has gotten a rough treatment over the years?
Well, I completely agree with you, James, that I see Pat Garrett as a much more tragic figure than Billy the Kid.
Me too.
Billy Kid is killed at age 21. Pat Garrett lives to see his image change. I mean, when he killed Billy the Kid, and you know this, I mean, he was celebrated. People were giving him money. I mean, they were collecting money for them, not just the territorial reward that he was after. They were collecting a pot, they were so glad that Billy the Kid no longer existed. I mean, these people didn't even know Billy the Kid, most of them. But I mean, the reputation of Billy was this evil outlaw gang leader, and they were terrified of that Billy the Kid. And so, yeah, I mean, Pat Garrett was celebrated as a hero, but he lived long enough to see the myth grow and his reputation really shattered, before his death. And he even lamented, "I wish that Billy had killed me." I mean, so it's a much sadder, much more tragic than Billy the Kid, and he didn't deserve it. And I always go back to, the thing is, Pat Garrett had grit. Okay, nobody else wanted that job of tracking down Billy, and he did. He went out there, he risked his life, and and Billy the Kid had made threats. The next time we meet, I'm going to shoot Pat Garrett or kill Pat Garrett. I mean, he knew that the potential for him getting shot by someone who had killed other lawmen was very real. And that was another reason, I think, even just a year later when his book is published with Ash Upson, he was so tired of all the stories that were starting to circulate then, and he wanted to set the record straight and says, no, this is what happened. And I always admired about Pat, to me, how truthful he was, because in the book, he admits things that do not reflect well on him at all.
Right.
He takes the blame for his deputies getting killed in Lincoln. He should have known better. He admits that he told his deputies at Stinking Spring to shoot. I mean, you're not going to let him surrender. It's murder, right? He admits that that's what they did. And he also admits that these stories about me hiding behind a couch are not true. But if there had been a couch, I would have been hiding behind it. Yeah, I mean, so I really admire that, and that's why I put a lot of faith in that account. I just, if he's willing to admit these things that are unsavory, why would he make something up? So
right.
So anyway, but to get back to your point, he's a really sad individual. He was abandoned by a lot of his friends towards the end of his life, whether deservedly so or not. And he died in an awful way. He didn't die like Billy, shot in the back. I mean, while urinating. I mean, and then nobody, it just seemed like the officials were glad to see him go and kind of like, we're done with this. I mean, I don't know if you recall this, James, but the doctor that did the autopsy wasn't even called to testify. He was shocked. He said, I found the hairs pointing in where this guy shot in the back of the head, and they didn't call me. And it's just kind of like they just wanted it to go away and be done with Pat Garrett. So yeah, it's very sad, and what his family had to go through. He had all those kids.
Yeah.
And of course, his wife eventually got his revolver back. That was one little brief moment of happiness.
Victory.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but I agree with you. I think that Pat Garrett, I have, now, but here's the other thing, James, and you brought this up. What I encountered in researching my book and later was that if you are a fan of Billy the Kid, you hate Pat Garrett. If you are sympathetic or like Pat Garrett, then Billy the Kid is a scum. He's an outlaw, and I tried in my book, I was sympathetic to both of them. I mean,
Yes.
Circumstances threw them together, and Billy lived his life because he had to. Pat Garrett lived his life, and he was enforcing the law, and not one. Neither is either better or worse than the other, and I try to see them both sympathetically. And I'm not a Billy the Kid hater, and I'm not a Pat Garrett hater. I am.
Right.
I'm a history lover. I want to tell the story
Yes.
as best I can.
Yes. And I think, I have a show called Chasing Billy, so I hope nobody questions my love of Billy. But
Sure.
that dichotomy we really have to work on that, opposition, because that is the case. Both men were victims of circumstance. Both were trying to do what was best for them. Billy, I mean, come on. It was, you've killed 2 guards, you've escaped. That you're going to get killed if you get caught. It's going to be bad for you regardless. Even if you're not, you're going to hang. So you had the chance to leave. I'm sure Pat was aware that all those guys had plenty of time to get out if they wanted to. But as long as they were there, Pat had a job to do, and he was duty bound to do it.
Mhm.
And Pat had a strong sense of obligation in that regard. And I think even on a certain level, Pat might have loved to have seen them flee and go to Mexico or wherever, because it wouldn't have been his problem anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
But as long as it was his problem, he was going to have to do what he had to do. But I think as I've gotten older, and I have 4 kids, and I think becoming a dad and raising kids, you start to see Pat in a different light, because Billy, as much as you identify with him in certain respects, he never got to marry or have kids, and never got to experience those adversities. Whereas you can look at Pat as a father, a working father trying to support, and raise 4 kids. You're like, he was out there trying to get it. He was out there, he had a kid, at least one, I think, while Billy was on the loose. I mean, he was thinking about a newborn at home. I mean, this is stuff that I don't think I would have factored in prior to being a dad. And I think that might have softened my approach to Pat a little bit,
Well, and also you'll recall that, Pat did say good things about Billy the Kid.
Always.
Yeah. So, he never painted him as this evil person. And I think he did, regret that it came down to that moment at Fort Sumner, July 14th, 1881. But you know why Billy the Kid did not go to Mexico, right?
Well, I would imagine Paulita and just having a home at Fort Sumner. That would be my answer.
Well, actually, it was because there were no good photographers in Mexico. That's my Billy the Kid joke. He loved the camera. We know he loved the camera, right?
He did, absolutely. Yeah. We've got 300 pictures of him.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't want to take up time, and I'll cut this from the episode. But have you seen that photo that we released, that Silver City thing with the envelope and the thing that belonged to Lang Spraggins? And
is it a cased image? Is it in a case?
Cased image. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that. I don't think that's Billy, because that cased image dates to the 1860s. That type of matte and
interesting.
Right. Now, James, it doesn't mean that somebody couldn't. Sometimes they'll put a later photo into an earlier case. That sometimes happens. But if that image is original to that case, that's a Civil War era case. So that kind of dismisses it right there. And James, that's one of the things that a lot of both scholars and amateur scholars, you really have to know the history of photography when you're examining images and the processes. And so, so that, to me, that was a dead giveaway right away when I saw that the metal mat in the little case, that's Civil War era. And so, let's see, I'm looking now.
That was it came in an envelope. This threw me off. I don't think that envelope would have existed in the 1875.
Yeah. Now, where's the image itself?
It is. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Let me filter through
Yes.
here.
Okay. Now I can see it. Yeah, I saw it there for a second. Yeah, that's a Civil
There we
War
go.
era case. So
Okay, cool.
that's 1860s for sure. Um, so yeah,
And what photography place would just stamp on there Silver City photo?
I've never
You
seen
know,
that ever like that.
Antrim Kid.
Oh, it says Antrim
It's
Kid.
like you're
Oh,
right here in pencil, yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. No,
And
that's
it's like you're putting all points of provenance right there
yeah.
on
Yeah,
the
no,
item, you know?
but again, the case is the giveaway, and the other thing, James, is that what you're seeing there. So that matted tintype has been removed from that side. So
Uh,
somebody
that's a
stamped that.
giveaway right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they took that out, they stamped that in there. But I mean, why would you? I mean, it just seems very odd to be those big letters and the stamped Silver City. I mean, photographers. I
Right.
mean, I've never seen an image like that. But also, I mean, it's a Civil War era photo, so there probably wasn't even a photographer in Silver City. I mean, I don't even know, when did Silver City, when did it start, or when was it founded? Was it like 1870 or something? Or
Well, we'll say there was I found a record of a photographer arriving in Silver City around 1874. His name
okay.
was Hanna, Hanna,
Mm,
and he even later in life claimed to have photographed Billy the Kid, which I thought was interesting.
mm,
But
interesting.
that's as far as that goes, you know.
Well, that
Uh,
that cased image is definitely 18 Civil War era, 1861, 65.
yeah,
But here's the thing, James, about I've always believed there's a possibility. I've always believed there's probably another image of Billy the Kid, but it's
yeah,
probably as a child.
yeah,
Most parents, you would spend the money and have an image made of your children, and unfortunately, we'll probably never know. I mean, it's probably an
right.
unidentified image. I mean, I go to antique stores and antique malls. I'm always going through the photos because I collect photos,
Oh, it's
and historic
fantastic.
photos.
Yeah,
And anyway, I'm guessing that in Wichita or Denver or Santa Fe, I'll bet you that his mom had an image made of the two boys, but we'll just never know. We'll never, it's out there somewhere. We'll just never know it's them.
yeah, I know, and that's the tragedy. I mean, the time for provenance is really past. It's the
Mm,
chain of custody, that kind of thing. We'll probably never
yeah,
have that again,
no,
like we have with the Dedrick tintype,
yeah, no.
or it's just unfortunate that that's the case.
I had a friend tell me.
But yeah,
I had a friend tell me that the only way the today's scholars would believe an image was Billy the Kid was if they dug him up and he had it in his hand, his bony hand was the image. That's the only way, because we've gotten so critical, right? It's like, it's like,
yeah,
that provenance is so important. And you're right. I mean,
yeah,
it's the chances of unknown photos surfacing are so slim, which has a good provenance chain. And also, there's just so many people out there willing to fake stuff, and
yeah,
whether it's documents or images, or it's somebody, you could take a little carte de visite and write on the back, Henry Antrim or something, and it's in
right.
pencil. How are you going
Like
to
they
know?
did there. Yeah,
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 exactly.
just like they did there. I'm not a photo guy. I don't, people are honestly mentally ill over photos. It's
Yeah,
weird.
yeah.
And I'm just not. I don't. I think we have the one authentic, and barring
Mhm.
some miraculous provenance, that's probably all we're going to get.
Yeah.
But
You may go now.
have you seen any of the new Billy the Kid show?
No, no, I haven't. People ask me that all the time. What do you think of that? I mean, this it's like I'm a film critic or something.
Right.
No, I've not seen. I mean, I've seen a trailer or whatever.
Mhm.
But I say more power to them. I mean, the thing is that, and the same thing happened, James, with this Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy War, and
Right. Yeah.
it kind of bothers me when the historians jump all over these new productions.
Wyatt Earp. Where's your little lapdog, Doc Holliday?
And they talk
Mhm.
about how inaccurate they are, but you know what? It's introducing a new audience to these figures, and it has a domino effect. I mean, who's to say
Yes.
that after watching the Billy the Kid series that they don't go to Lincoln, or they don't pick up my book or your book? And the same with Wyatt Earp. I mean, the Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy was a hugely popular show on Netflix, and it had all
It
kinds
was
of
a success. Yeah.
it had all kinds of historical errors. But you know what? That probably means there's going to be another Western made. And again, people might visit Tombstone because they saw that show. They want to see the real Wyatt Earp or the real Wyatt Earp was. So I say more power to them, because it helps all of us when that happens. And then when we give our talks or write our books, and we can give the real story. And anyway, James, films and movies, that's just another reality. It's not history.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't take them seriously as history. It's another reality or whatever, where people do different things based on a historical figure or a character. And sure, it's fun when one's really accurate, but they can never be completely accurate. And so as a historian, I know when a film is good, and that's when I stop looking for anachronisms and I'm wrapped up in the story. If I'm looking at, well, that's the wrong gun, well, then the acting or the story must not be very good. But if I'm not paying attention to that, it was that way with Dances with Wolves. I mean, I watch, and there's all kinds of historical flaws with that. But man, what a story! I just got lost. I got lost in that world, which is what the whole thing is about, right? Getting lost in that time.
I think that's what people ask me if I like the Billy the Kid show, and I tell them I don't. It is radically inaccurate, but Tombstone is inaccurate. Young Guns and Young Guns 2 are inaccurate. And I love those because, man, you can't beat the story. And my issue with the Billy the Kid show is the story. But like you said, I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of folks who have come to Billy the Kid through that new show. And that's fantastic. That's great. They get super excited about it and want to learn more. I'm not a fan of the story. I always, I critique entertainment for story writing, and storytelling, and not about the history, but yeah, I was watching Young Guns 2 the other day and thinking, man, if I didn't have such an emotional investment because it was what introduced me to Billy, I would be like, this is horribly inaccurate.
Well, James, I mean, the Young Guns, I mean, again, that created this huge tourist frenzy in New Mexico and interest in Billy the Kid. And the thing about what I was going to say about Young Guns is that Young Guns 2, of course, they have the Brushy Bill Roberts story or whatever.
Also known as William H. Bonney.
Whoa. William H. Bonney?
Alias Billy the Kid.
Billy the Kid, huh? Billy the Kid was shot and killed by Pat Garrett. Everybody knows that. It's common knowledge.
There are other lawyers around you, piece of chicken shit. Get back in your vehicle and drive before I make it 22, just for the goddamn hell of it.
But again, that was a hook. That really draws people in. It's like, oh, you really think that Billy the Kid wasn't killed? And of course, they're making a Young Guns 3, supposedly. But it continues to hold the interest of people in that story. And so, people then can get a book and find out, oh, well, Brushy Bill was a fraud or whatever. But you know what? The real Billy the Kid is just as interesting as he ever was. So I say more power to them, get people interested, and they'll even if they go to a Wikipedia page and read about Billy, they still learn something more than what they knew before. And you just don't know what impact it's going to have later on. So I'm glad to see that stuff. As Paul Hutton told me that Taylor Sheridan was his hero because he has these successful Western shows, and I understand that. It's
I can understand.
So, and we're really seeing kind of a resurgence in interest in Western history, and with just the films and the documentaries and the series. I hope it continues. I have a vested interest in that, of course, because that's what I write about. But I hope that resurgence is here for a while.
Me too, in a big way, and I want to talk about that with you more sometime. So that means you'll have to come back. I could talk for 4 more hours about this stuff. So definitely want to get you back. It's been very enjoyable, Mark. I appreciate you coming on. I'm stoked to buy your book. coming out on November 11th, and I hope everybody else does. And I encourage everybody else to, because no doubt it's going to be highly entertaining and informative. And I need to learn about Wyatt Earp, because that's one that I haven't jumped too much into yet. So yeah, Mark, thank you very much for talking with us today, and come back.
I will. Now, like I said at the beginning, keep doing what you're doing, James. We need you.
Thanks, man. And we'll get together and jam sometime.
Oh yeah, sounds good.
All right. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
All right.